Marco codes! Hey folks, Marco here. Welcome back to our text editor series. You know what's missing from our editor? We can navigate around, we can scroll page and whatever. We cannot search. What I want to do is I want to be able to press CTRL F and then at the bottom put in my search query. And then my editor should find, obviously, my search query and let me navigate through all the results in the file, forwards and backwards and whatnot. Sounds like a lot of fun to implement? It is. Let's check it out. Alright, let's warm up, and by the way, it's really damn cold outside today, by implementing control key presses. We took a couple of shortcuts so far, meaning when you look at our handle key method, we simply check if the key the user pressed equals Q, and then we exit our editor. Ideally, it should be Control Q. Same with find, it should be Control F. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new method, call it CTRL, create the method, give the parameters nice names. And now, how would you implement the method? There's literally no way for you to know unless you Google for it, Stack Overflow for it, or you're simply a genius. Background knowledge. What happens when you press Control and the key, not just the key is being sent to your program, but it's actually bitwise ended, is that a word, before it's being sent. And you need to repeat the process. What you need to do is you need to take the key, bitwise end, with a specific value, which is this in hex. Forget about it, just copy and paste my code and it will work. Now let's try this out on the command line. Fire up the editor. You can't see me press Ctrl Q, but I am. Yes, I did press Ctrl Q. That already feels so professional, feels like a real editor. Back in the IDE, let's just put the other case in here. If the key equals Ctrl F, then something should happen. Yes, we should, execute editor find, whatever that is. We're simply going to create that method and we're going to implement it right now. All right, baby steps. What should happen when we press Ctrl F? The first thing, before we can do anything, the status bar down here should be redrawn. We should see a nice little message hinting at, how to use the search functionality. And that's it. Catching the user input comes a bit later. Let's do it. Back in the editor find method, I'm going to do my first maybe a bit too early hyper-optimization. I know that I want to have kind of a prompt method because, I might prompt the user, hey, please put in your search term, or maybe do you want to load a file, or do you want to, save a file, all these kind of things. So I'm just, going to create a new method called prompt right away. Well, I'm going to say, well, search, this is how you do it. Just put in your search query. You can also use escape, arrows, and enter later on, right? And that's all I want to do at the moment. I just want to prompt the user with a message. Just as a quick reminder, how we draw status messages at the moment, we need to go back to draw status bar. In here, you can see that for now, we just print out a fixed message showing us the coordinates. We put them in for debug purposes. What I want to do is I want to split this up. So my editor is going to have a status message. And we're going to do it like so. So let's say the message that we want to draw at the moment is, well, the rows, right? Just like before. But if we have a status message set, we want to draw the status message instead. And otherwise, we just fall back, to the default rows and cursor and whatnot. Then let's just quickly create a setter for our status message, like so. And that's it. And yes, we could reorder the fields and the method, it would make sense. But for now, let's go back to our prompt method. Inside here, the only thing that I want to do now is I want to say set status message. And that's it for now. That's all the prompt does. Let's try it out. Back on the command line, boot up the editor. Yes. Control F. Yeah, look at that. So the message down here looks nice. Search, put in the search query, whatever, use escape. But there's one tiny problem. We can now still, navigate around and we're still, hung in the, I call the game loop of our editor, the main loop, so to speak. So ideally, when I now press arrow keys or write something, whatever, something down here should change. It shouldn't influence the rest of the editor. How to do that? Well, let's find out. How will we go about catching user input in our status bar? Well, you know me by now, we need some good old code duplication. Copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. For that, let's have a look at our main editor loop. The while loop, where we say, well, let's scroll and refresh the screen. Actually, scroll should go inside refresh screen, right? And then we refresh the screen, we draw it, then we wait for a key press, and then we handle the key press. So let's just copy this here, go back to our prompt method, and yay, success, we're just going to paste it in here. We don't need the handle key method down here because we're going to do slightly different key handling for now in this loop. Let's just surround it with a try catch. Let's put the refresh screen inside here, and we're good to go. Now, the thing is, a naive way to implement this, and actually a good way for now, is we say, well, the user can input, characters, and we want to store these characters in a string. So let's use, for example, a string builder. And that string builder could also be called user input. Maybe let's rename it to that, like so. Then we don't just want to blindly set the status message to whatever, was passed into the prompt method, like search whatever. Instead, we're going to check if our user input is empty. And if it's not empty, we just, output whatever the user put in so far. Otherwise, we're just going to go with the default message. That will work just fine. And then another naive way would be now to say, well, whenever a user pressed the key, we're just going to do user input, append, and put the key in. Do you think this is going to work? Well, let's try it out. CTRL F, let's type some keys. Oh no, we get numbers. That's because we appended numbers, not characters to our string builder. That's going to be an easy fix. The other problem is we cannot get out of typing mode again. So escape or whatever, nothing works. I simply can now just kill my terminal, and we need to fix that as well. All right, so back in our IDE, first things first, what we're going to do is we're going to say, well, don't just append an integer, just, convert it to a character. Right, so that's the first fix. The second fix is we need to do some minor key handling. So for example, if the key that the user pressed is the escape key, you should know that by now. Or if the key pressed equals, let's say, a carriage return when the user pressed enter, then what we want to do is we just want to return from the whole method. And by the way, let's just then clear the status message, set status message to null. Don't freak out. Yes, that's a bit of an ugly call for now. We can still fix it later, but for now, this will work just fine. Let's try this out again. CTRL F. Yay, we can type and we get the string displayed down here immediately. When we press enter, we're out of search mode again. So yeah, the message gets reset. By the way, when I go escape, the thing is I have to hit escape twice. And that has to do with the way we implemented escape, because our while, our read key method actually, when you hit escape, waits for other characters afterwards, because it could be an escape sequence. So for now, in a real editor, we'd have to fix that, but for now, you have to press escape twice actually, enter just once. But other than that, this works. Now let me try and press arrow keys. Ooh, that doesn't look good. Page up, page down, I can press them. I don't want to have question marks down here. In fact, I want to disallow pressing all these keys. Let's try and fix that. Back in the editor, what I could do is I could have an else clause saying, well, if the character is not a control character, like for example, tab any of these keys, I don't want my user to be able to press those. And the character is, by the way, let's just make it like less than 128. Why 128? Let's boot up an ASCII table. Yes, you can see these are all my ASCII characters. In fact, I just want the user to be able to, push alphanumerical keys and a couple of other ones. Back in the editor, this means here's our check, right? User input append, and we should be good to go. Back in the editor search mode, yes, let me try arrow keys. Yay! So now you can, you can't see me frantically pressing these keys, but they don't work anymore. One thing we're missing, by the way, backspace isn't working. Backspace, delete, and also what most editors have implemented, Control H. So we just need to finally fix up these three keys, and then we're good to go. Back in the IDE, let's create another else if clause. Meaning, if the key equals del, I think we implemented del in the first episode because it's an escape sequence, right? Or if the key equals backspace. By the way, backspace is 127 if I'm not mistaken. So we're just going to create a constant up here, 127, right? Or if the user press Control H. Then what we want to do is we want to do if the user input, if in fact the user input exists, if the user put in some characters, we want to do user input delete jar add, and it's going to be user input length -1. Some good old index code, right? So now we have delete implemented. We have, these key presses implemented. Set status message null. This should just work. One final try. Control F. Backspace works. Delete works. Control H works, right? Pretty damn cool. So now our status bar handling finally is complete, and we can add the actual search functionality. Yay! I have the feeling we're almost there. Let's implement searching. We have our prompt method at the moment, which simply in the end changes the status bar message. But we need to execute some logic in here as well. And then it's not just, for searching, but it's also for file loading, file saving, whatever have we. That is why I would like to add a by consumer to this method, string integer consumer. What's a by consumer? Well, I'm going to show you in a second. Let's get the import right. And let's just add such a new by consumer here. And maybe we just, replaced it with a lambda. What is the first parameter? The first parameter is going to be the whole query, whatever the user put into the status bar. The second parameter is the last key press. We'll find out why we need the last key press in a second. But for now, let's just imagine that we want to react on the query. We want to execute our search logic. Meaning, by the way, in here, the consumer needs to be called. And let's just say, well, in this case, we don't obviously want the consumer to be called. But after, the consumer hit backspace or he just entered a key, we want to immediately spawn our business logic, so to speak, the search function for now. So we're just going to call accept here, put in user input to string, and the last key that the user pressed. That's all we need to do to execute the logic. What is the logic going to look like, the search logic? Well, very simple. We're just going to build two microservices. We're going to call Elasticsearch from Amazon, and it needs to scale properly. It needs to be reliable, so maybe even some Kubernetes inside. Just joking. We're going to use something that's going to make all the lead coders' eyes bleed. We're just going to use a simple for loop for now, and then we can always make it better later on. But for now, what I want to do is I want to go through all the lines of our content. So we're just going to go through content size here. And as you might expect, we're just going to get the current line. So content get I, which is the current line. We have the complete search query here. So the only thing we need to do is we need to do current line index of. Does my current line contain the query? Then we're going to get a match back. If the match is -1, then the line didn't contain the query. So if the match is not -1, we found something in the line. And then the only thing that's left to do is, for us, is we need to set the cursor coordinates. For example, cursor Y is going to be I, very simple. Cursor X is going to be the match. That's why we call index of here. The thing is, this doesn't work 100% perfect. Meaning that, for example, we haven't implemented all the tab rendering, for example. And also with very big and wide lines, there might be issues at some point we'll have to fix in future episodes. But for now, cursor X equals match will do just fine. And then last but not least, there's just one tiny thing I want to do. I want the first line of the screen always to contain my search result, right? And for that, we need to, scroll the editor into the right place. And again, you have to watch the previous episodes and how we implemented the scroll method. But what we can do is simply make sure that our offset Y is greater than cursor Y, either by +1ing it or, setting it to content size. And then our scroll method will make sure that cursor Y is going to be the first line of the redrawn screen. And by the way, maybe we want to break here on the very first result, not, endlessly execute the loop until we see the last result. Let's try that out. Right, I'm going to try out a different file now, the viewer.java file actually that we've been, working on. Control F, int. Look at that. Did you see that? While I was typing, because the consumer fires on every key press, we get immediate search results. And then I could just see, int in the top line of the screen. Pretty damn cool. Actually, let's search for list. Right, I get taken to list. Do we have a record here somewhere? Let me try and see right at the very end. That is pretty damn cool. So search works. Let me try it with int again. We have many int, as you can see on the screen. Now, the problem is I would like to be able to navigate, between the search results, so go backwards and go forwards. That is something we still have yet to implement. All right, come on, let's go. I need to leave in a minute. I want to be done with the search implementation. We want to be able to search forwards and to search backwards. Meaning we need a way to store our search direction, right? So let's just create an enum search direction forwards and backwards. Have a field search direction and set it to, by default, let's set it to forwards. Then we also want to store the location of the last match, the index. So that means we need an int where we're going to say, so last match equals -1 for now. That's all we need. Now let's write some dirty code. First of all, by the way, what we could do is we say at the beginning here, if the query equals null or the query is empty, just to safeguard, the query is blank, then we just want to return. And what we could do as a safety measure, what we're going to do again is, let's say the search direction now equals forward. We're just going to reset it. And the last match is going to be -1. And then maybe you're smart enough to just put static here so you can actually access these fields. Right. So now what cases do we have? What I essentially want to do is I want to be able to type. The only special cases while searching are when I press the arrow keys, because arrow right and down should bring me forwards. Arrow up and left should, make me search backwards. So indeed, what we're going to do is, and that's why we need the last key press. If the last key press equals arrow left or the last key press equals arrow up, that should be arrow up instead. Then what I want to do is I want to make the search direction backwards. Otherwise, let me just quickly copy and paste that line. Else if the last key press is arrow down or arrow right, then I want to make sure that the search direction is forwards. And then last but not least, what I still want to do in the default case that the user just presses, any other key, I want to make sure that the search direction is being reset to forwards and last match equals -1. And yes, we can refactor this and make it a bit better, but for now, again, I just want to see things work. Now, what are we going to do with our for loop down here? At the moment, we start with index 0 and then cycle through all the lines of the file until there's the first match, which is fine, but it's not going to work anymore if we're just, if the last match was somewhere in the middle of the file, then we want to start from there and not from, position 0. So we're going to need a new variable, and I'm just going to call it current index, and I'll point it to last match. So at the beginning, it's -1, but as soon as we have a match later on, we want to update the current index to that match. Then I still want to, go, for example, if my file has 40,000 lines, I still, from the middle of the file, for example, I want to do at most 40,000 searches over the end of the file, and then, start at the beginning of the file again. So we're going to keep the for loop actually. What we need to change, however, inside here is not to work with I anymore, but just with the current index. So we're just going to put the current index here and the current index here. And if there was a match, then last match should be the current index. But hold on a second. That seems to be okay, but we're not changing the current index. We have yet to do that. The current index needs to change, and it needs to change in such a way that it includes the search direction. If the search direction, the current search direction, equals forwards, then the current index should always increase by 1 once we go through the loop. If it's backwards, then it should decrease by 1, right? Now, the last piece of the puzzle was, the search wrapping, so to speak. If our last match was somewhere in the middle of the file, then I still want to go through all the lines of the file until I'm at the end. And once I'm at the end and I haven't found any matches, I want to start over again at the very beginning of the file, so at position 0, so to speak. Hence, what we need to do is we want to have one last if-else inside here. And the case I just mentioned, if the current index equals the end of the file, so content.size, what do we want to do? We want to set current index to 0. That's a bit boring, but that works. Else, if the current index equals -1, so right, we're at the first line and then whoop, -1, then the current index should actually be content size -1. And yes, we should take this whole method, refactor it nicely, extract a couple of methods, or we should just try it out on the command line and see if it works. Are you ready? Let's fire up the editor for last time. CTRL+F, int. We found the first int, arrow up. Right arrow key now. Bam, bam. Look at that. I can, cycle through all the search results. How cool is that? Now I'm going backwards and pressing arrow left. Right. That also works. How cool. And I can, keep pressing the key, and you can see I actually did cycle around from the end of the file to the beginning of the file. That is pretty damn cool. It works as expected, right? And if I don't have any other search results, I can't navigate. But in the case of ints or strings, for example, I can just happily jump through my file. How freaking awesome is that? Isn't that just plain magic? I still can't believe it myself. In any case, that's it for today. Leave me a comment down below. What do you want to see next? Should we work on syntax highlighting or on any of the other 20 million problems that our text editor still has? Let me know. Until next time, sayonara.